You're listening to Sports Radio Detroit.
Hello, everyone. Welcome back to the Last Track Review podcast on Sports Radio Detroit. As always, I'm your host for this podcast, Chris Platty. I hope everyone is having a great weekend. This is going to be a weird episode. This is a feeling I haven't really felt before when it comes to podcasting. Usually I love doing podcasts. I love doing what I'm doing. But this podcast is going to be different. It's different circumstances. It's not good. It's not good stuff that I have to talk about. It's something that I want to talk about, but it's met with tragedy and just a lot of pain and sorrow and sympathy to those that are affected by this, and that is the tragic and untimely passing of Nipsey Hussle. Now, I was originally going to do the Hip Hop Madness bracket part 2 that I created last week. I created the bracket and I put it up there and I did a podcast and I did part 1, which was the round of 64, and I was going to do the rest to save time and put that up this week. But obviously with this tragic news, I felt this was something I had to speak on, even though it's something I truthfully, I don't know if it's not that I don't want to speak about it. It's just that I wish I didn't have to. It's that it's really just something that's been bothering me ever since it happened. So, let's get into it. So for those of you that didn't hear, yesterday afternoon, Nipsey Hussle was shot and killed in the parking lot of his own store on West Slauson Ave. Nipsey Hussle's legacy lives through his longtime girlfriend and 2 daughters, the youngest of which is only 2 years old. For those of you that don't know who Nipsey Hussle is, he is a West Coast rapper who emerged in the mid-2000s with critically acclaimed mixtapes like Bullet Ain't Got No Names, The Marathon Continues, and later Crenshaw, before releasing his debut album Victory Lap last year in 2018, which was nominated for a Grammy. And actually, on my podcast, I said it was the second best album of the year. Of the 200 plus hip hop albums that I listened to, that to me was an amazing, amazing album. It was such a moment, such a place and time, and I'll talk about that record a little bit more. But let me just get back to the biography of him. So he had the early success in the mid 2000s with the mixtapes like Bullets Ain't Got No Names, and that led to Nipsey signing to Epic Records, but they mutually parted ways in 2010, which led to Nipsey creating his own independent label, All Money In. Nipsey left Epic Records because of the fact that he wasn't getting the right ownership that he felt when it came to his music. He wasn't owning as much of his content as he felt he should have. Owning your masters is something that's big in hip-hop. You hear it talked about a lot. You hear owning your royalties, your masters, publishing, all that. These are words that are thrown around, but people don't really understand how important it is and how much labels don't want you to own that stuff. Labels always want to own that because that's what will get them paid every time. The song is in a movie or in some random video or it gets streamed or whatever. But Nipsey wanted to own his own music, so he mutually parted ways and created his label, All Money In. And speaking of the before-mentioned Crenshaw tape, this was actually the story that kind of caught me onto Nipsey and was really just an incredible story. In 24 hours, he sold 1,000 copies of a mixtape for $100 each. Even Jay-Z bought 100 copies himself. That was just unheard of. Just being a mixtape that's out there digitally. He was selling it physically, like CD form. Only 1,000 copies were made, and in 24 hours, all 1,000 of those copies were sold out, and they were $100 a pop. It just showed his business mind, his business savvy, which is the next part I'm going to get into, because that to me was the bigger part. Nipsey's not just an artist. He is more than that. He's an entrepreneur, an activist. He was involved in a lot of things. He owned and launched his own clothing store called the Marathon Clothing on West Slauson Ave in 2016. That was where he was fatally shot yesterday. This is the same corner where he grew up, and he was known for selling drugs, and he ended up turning that not only into a positive symbol, but a source of revenue for his community. So he was giving back to the community. The community was actually getting money put in it. And this just begins to speak on the integrity of Nipsey Hussle, because that was one of the things that was most special about him, was his integrity. That, a lot of artists will talk about, giving back to the communities and empowerment and all that, but he was literally doing it. Those most artists will just put a store in New York or Manhattan or LA or something. They'll have their own, they'll have their own merchandise shop in a cool, like, touristy spot. But like, Nipsey actually put his clothing store in his actual hood, which is making real money in his hometown. And that is just amazing, that his community is actually, he's actually providing for his community. And that was just the beginning of his plan. Nipsey planned to turn the entire plaza into a chain of franchises, creating revenue for his community. He also started recently, last year, he started Vector 90, which was a program that Nipsey helped launch in Crenshaw that taught children coding and brought technology to his communities, something that they didn't have. He's quoted as saying that he wanted to bridge the gap between the inner cities and Silicon Valley, and that was really the whole basis of it. And that this was a scale model, that he wanted this program to be eventually distributed and established all across the entire nation of America and other inner cities, that are just lacking resources for the youth. He also did some acting. He acted in a few films, including Caged Animal, where he was the main role. He was also actively working on a documentary about this doctor who was a controversial doctor who believed to have found a cure. His name was Dr. Sebi. He was believed to have found a cure to many diseases, but died of complications from pneumonia. So many people believed he was silenced for his medical innovations. So that's really the story of Nipsey. Like, he did a lot of things, especially within the last 2 years. He really diversified, and put his hands in a lot of different things. It wasn't just music. It was just, it was business. It was programs to help communities. It was a lot of things, and he did a lot of things that were very special and very influential, to a lot of people. And not only that, but he practiced what he preached. He was very motivational in his music, and in his music he talked about, everything that he was doing, like literally saying, this is how I did this is how I did that, this is how I made money, this is how I got my own masters. He was telling his story of not only what he's doing, but how he did it. And that was very special. So beyond just being a talented writer and storyteller and just overall hip hop artist, he was incredibly great at putting content and substance in his music. So my thoughts, of course, this is said when people pass. It's said very often, but Nipsey was truly a special and a great person. He was a great human being. He was articulate. He was thoughtful. He was a leader and a role model to many for all the stuff that I have previously mentioned. He practiced everything he preached, and was one of the few artists that not only made the right career moves, but the right life moves as well, and did everything with pure integrity. There is not a artist or a person out there that has said a bad word, and that was the thing that's shocking. These kind of these murders are always shocking when they happen. They've happened before in hip hop, a lot, but this one was really shocking because I haven't ever found a a negative word from Nipsey Hussle from anyone. There was people that didn't like his music, sure, or his rapping style, but even most of those people really respected the message and rooted for him because they saw all the things that he was doing. And there's always going to be the small crowd of people that if they hate something, then they can't respect it, even if they can't look past enough to respect what it is and what its impact is. But beyond those people, beyond that small group of people, Nipsey was greatly respected for everything that he did. And he demonstrated not only to how to make it in the music industry, but and have longevity in the music industry too. Because I mean, this is an artist that popped off in the early or the mid 2000s, and here we are, 10 years later, 15 years later, and he's a successful entrepreneur, and he's created this diverse revenue of income. With all the things that he's working on, the documentaries, the businesses, the real estate, all that stuff, and of course on top of that, music that he actually owned. He owned his own music. Um, so he did a lot. He did a lot of great things, and in a very short amount of time. He was only 33 years old before his passing. So I don't know. This was one that just really upset me, and it bothered me, and I wanted to speak about this because I wanted to get my thoughts, my feelings out there as a form of not only therapy for myself, but just to show the listeners of this podcast not only how I feel about him, but about why I feel the ways I feel about him, about his passing, why this is a big deal, because it really is, man. I mean, you're seeing so many people pour out tributes, everything from LeBron to Rihanna to Drake, the biggest stars in the world, to just people, producers like Sap, who worked with him one time on a record and said nothing but the best things about him. So everybody he worked with, not just the superstars or not just the people that he was cool with, but literally everybody that's ever worked with him spoke highly of him. And that's why that's why this is so confusing to me, his death. This is why it's so sudden. This is why it's so shocking, because not only was it in his hometown, in front of his own store, where he was such a beloved figure, because in LA he was an actual superstar. Like even when he wasn't popping off, just because of what he did and what he was about, the streets have always respected Nipsey Hussle, and that's why I find this very confusing, very sudden, very shocking, because I've only heard nothing but great things, both in the music industry and in the street life, which he was affiliated with in the past, and still was affiliated with, not in terms of activity, but just knowing people in that community, in the gang culture. And and even the streets, they just spoke so highly of him, and he was the type of guy that I thought would never have to experience this, because he was somebody that was respected on both ends of the spectrum, regardless of what gang he was in. He was respected, and across all gangs, across the entire nation, and in many communities, he was respected. So not only was it on an individual level, but on an industry level as well. And I just want to recommend some records for those of you that haven't heard of Nipsey Hussle, or maybe you have now heard of him through his passing and just never checked him out, or want to check him out now, or you just heard his name before, like I did a couple years ago, and it took me a while to check him out, actually, just because you get mentioned a million artists a day. But this is one I really want people to listen to, and not just because of his passing, but just because of everything that he's about. So here are some records. And I'm a later Nipsey Hussle fan, so I can't say everything about about his early mixtapes. I can't pull records off of that, because I've only heard bits and pieces of those, and I've only heard them on a small number of occasions too. So really, I'll start with just the entire Victory Lap album. Like I said before, it was a great moment in hip hop when it happened. He was that underdog that finally had his crown jewel moment. It's a Grammy nominated album. Literally front to back, every single track is good. The first 8 tracks are absolutely amazing to me. Not one of them is less than stellar. So you could really just play the first half of the album essentially and get nothing but stellar music. And even beyond that, it's still great all the way through. There's now one track on here I skip, but I know a lot of people don't really listen to albums front to back anymore. So I'll just pull off some of the big records that I liked off of that album. So Dedication, a song with Kendrick Lamar, was very great, very motivational, very inspirational, and you can just see through that record just how beloved and respected he was in the hip hop industry just by the way Kendrick not only approaches the song but what he says in the song and how he talks with Nipsey in the song about the mutual respect that they have for each other. And then the next track is called Young Brothers. It's not really called Brothers. It's called a word I obviously can't say, which I'm sure you all can guess. And Young Ones is a great track. It's very motivational. It's by far the top two Nipsey Hussle record that I've spun the most. It's actually I have two Nipsey Hussle records that are statistically to this day in my top 50 for most listened songs, and this is one of them. It's a very late night moody kind of track with spacious beat, the Party Next Door sample, and Nipsey Hussle is just rapping about his business acumen and about how he got to where he got to. So Young Ones is a great record. Again, that's not the name of it, but it is track 4 on Victory Lap. You'll know when you see it. It's a word that I obviously can't say, nor do I want to say. So moving forward, the next record I mentioned, Hustle and Motivate. Again, a very braggadocious anthem. Young Ones was more just vulnerable, reflective, and introspective, versus Hustle and Motivate, which is more braggadocious, but still giving you the same content about this is how I got to where I'm at. This is my status in the game, and things of that nature over a great beat. They actually used he actually reversed the same sample that Jay-Z used in his first mega hit, which was Hard Knock Life Volume 2. So check that out. You'll recognize it right away. Any hip hop fan will recognize that sample. On YG's album, this was a feature of his, and it was called F Donald Trump, or FDT is actually the track title itself, but that's what it stands for, is F Donald Trump. Obviously, it's a very political record, but it's also at the same time, it's also an absolute banger with a crazy bass, crazy kicks, and just an awesome record. YG and Nipsey were good friends. Like, they were actually real friends. They grew up, their parents knowing each other and stuff, and so they're actually really tight. And so it translates to that record. They have a lot of chemistry. YG actually has a record on Victory Lap with Nipsey, which is called why am I blanking on it right now? Damn. Why am I blanking on that record? Last Time That I Checked. That's the name of the record, yes. Last Time That I Checked. So that's also another good one, but I didn't put it on here because I didn't want to give out too many records. Next is Loaded Basses with CeeLo Green. Just very beautiful instrumentation. CeeLo Green absolutely kills it, and it just creates a beautiful contrast with Nipsey's rash, and kind of aggressive tone that he has through a lot of his records. Blue Laces 2, immaculate storytelling, immaculate writing, just an awesome song with a beautiful sample in the hook. It's an awesome, amazing song. It's Nipsey being great and also showcasing his high level of storytelling, especially in verse 3. Another one is Real Big. This is the outro to Victory Lap. And I really love this record. There's not much more to say about it other than I absolutely love this record. Check that one out. And then lastly, the intro track itself, Victory Lap, which was produced by the aforementioned Sap, one of my favorite producers in the game. And this one just really sets the tone for the whole album. It's very spacious, it's very moody, and it puts you in the zone. And really, you can listen to the whole Victory Lap album, But when you listen to the intro track, Victory Lap, it really just sets you up for the journey because, like I said before, when I first listened to that album, it felt like a moment in my life that I will remember for the rest of my life. Just how amazing it was, and the feeling that it gave. And so I do recommend the whole Victory Lap album, at least going through it once and telling and figuring out what you like and don't like. But if not, those are some of the records. Once again, Dedication, Young Brothers, Hustle and Motivate, F Donald Trump, Loaded Bases, Blue Laces 2, Real Big, and Victory Lap. And again, I apologize to the longtime Nipsey Hussle fans, and I will be the first to admit that I myself don't know everything in his extensive catalog of mixtapes. So I wanted to go with the records that I actually really knew and really sat with. But you can best believe that I'm going to be checking out the rest of his discography. I've already been doing so today, but I didn't want to put any of those records in there. Also, I recommend watching as many interviews as you can because he was so smart, genuine, and gave so much ideas. Everything he was about, he put out in his interviews. Much like Tupac. Tupac was to me the greatest rapper to interview. He was always so charismatic. He was always so personable, and he always just gave you so much substance. And Nipsey reminds me of that a lot when I watch his interviews. He's an artist that I really don't miss an interview. So you can check him out on Breakfast Club, Hot 97, Power 106, everywhere. Because this is a dude that's made the rounds, been in the game for, like I said, 15 years, 15, 16 years. So he's definitely been around, and he's got a lot of great interviews that I highly recommend you watch, just to kind of get more of a feel for who he is as a person beyond just the music, you know. So lastly, I want to close with saying that Nipsey, I'm so sorry I could never personally thank you for what you've done to not just my life by keeping me motivated, but also doing the same and more to your home community and countless others across the nation. My thoughts are with your family. I will be thinking about your girlfriend, your two daughters, and of course the millions and millions of fans that are like myself grieving across the world, really, because you were a special person, and I believe that you were only scratching the surface of what you were able to do with Victory Lap. That really, to me, put you in a whole nother stratosphere of superstardom, and just gave you so many more opportunities than you already created yourself. But I just wanted to say that I really respect everything you were about, everything you did. And again, I'm sorry I could never personally thank you. So, you know, I hope you're hearing this where you're at up in heaven. But I just want to say that I will keep you in my thoughts and prayers, and everyone that cares for you in my thoughts and prayers. So thank you, everyone. I'm sorry this was such a somber and sad podcast, but I felt it was only right for me to pay this tribute to, again, an amazing individual that did a lot for a lot of people. So thank you, everyone, for listening. Next week, I promise I will do the rest of the bracket just in time for the national championship game. I'll record that probably during the weekend and drop it on Monday. So that will be a very fun time, and I'm very excited. Again, the only reason I split it up was the simple fact that I was already at 57 minutes when I finished the round of 64, and I had so much fun when I was talking about it, but I looked up at the time recorder and I was like, oh my God, 57 minutes. Nobody's going to want to hear me talk by myself for 2 hours. So let me just put this into two parts. I also, if you want to look at it more, I had Spike Lee on my podcast where we broke down and came together on a consensus for every single decision of the entire bracket, filled it out together. We talked about where our brackets were different, all of that, and I also explained the process in detail about how the bracket was created. So check that one out. It's a long one. It's over 3 hours, but trust me, it is well worth it, and it is a very fun conversation. But if not, you will see the rest of my bracket. You'll see the rest of my bracket in the podcast next week, where I'll go through the round of 32 all the way to the national championship. It goes a lot faster than the first half, as you can imagine, just by the sheer number of matchups. But that being said, thank you everyone for listening. And in the words of the great Nipsey Hussle, the marathon continues. Rest in peace.
This has been an SRD production.